Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to STAND Central New Jersey's NJ Politics 101, Tackling Challenges in Equity. We are so glad that we have a large audience joining us. I believe we have over 100 people joining us for this important conversation. And I wanted to start by, we had an amazing panel today with us. We have Assemblywoman Verlina and Reynolds-Jackson, we have Commissioner Robinson, and we have Dr. Sadaf Jaffer, who is the ex-mayor of Montgomery. And at this point, I want to thank all the audience on behalf of STAND Central New Jersey for joining us this afternoon. I know it's raining, so this is a good way to spend your afternoon learning something about your government. So I am going to do the introductions first. I am honored to introduce Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds-Jackson. She's from the Legislative District 15. And I want to actually start with a quote she sent me, which is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. This is by Bernard Mayers, and I think that's an amazing, amazing quote. And I think this is something that we should all have in our repertoire. Assemblywoman Verlina Jackson is a product of the City of Trenton public school system. She obtained an advanced degree from Trenton State College, the College of New Jersey, and Central Michigan University, in addition to earning a municipal finance certificate from Rutgers University. Her career as a social worker, coupled with a commitment to public service, led her to the elected position of East Ward Councilwoman, where she legislated laws for the city of Trenton. Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson proudly served 7.5 years on city council before being elected to fill the vacant New Jersey Assembly seat in the 15th district. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Consumer Affairs Committee and serves as a member of the Joint Committee on Economic Justice and Equal Employment. And she's also on the Joint Committee of Public Schools, Commerce and Economic Development and Budget Committee. We are honored to welcome Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson. And now I get to introduce Commissioner Director Robinson. She's from Somerset County, where I live, and also Diane from STAND Central Jersey lives. So this is personal here. She is the ex officio to all county departments and divisions and liaison to the Constitutional Office, Courts and Criminal Justice, liaison to the Finance and Administrative Service, Human Resources. She's also the adjuster, Finance Information Technology, Telephone Services, Purchasing and Records Management. Commissioner Robinson is a veteran from the U.S. Air Force Reserves. We thank her for her service. She has a Bachelor of Arts, Labor Studies and Employee Relations from Rutgers University, New Brunswick. And she has a lot of awards to her name. She was named the InsiderNewJersey.com's 2019, 2020, and 2021 African American Power List. She's also the recipient of Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award, First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens, 2019. We are so honored that Commissioner Robinson is with us today. And it's my honor now to introduce Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. She is the mayor of Montgomery, the town that I am from, and she's a scholar and an activist. She has just completed 2 terms as the mayor of Montgomery. In January 2019, she became the first South Asian woman to serve as a mayor of municipality in New Jersey and the first Muslim woman to serve as a mayor of a municipality in the United States. Her signature initiatives include creating and implementing a robust crisis communications plan to help Montgomery Township maintain some of the lowest COVID-19 infection and fatality rates in all of New Jersey. She has facilitated a design and construction process for the township's new municipal center and library while securing $5.375 million in state funding. Responding to demands for racial justice by coordinating meetings for the Black community members and the youth activists within the township's police leadership to build trust and mutual understanding, and inaugurating a youth leadership council to elevate the voices of young people who are energized to lead. Dr. Jaffer is a postdoctoral research associate in South Asian Studies at Princeton University, where she teaches courses on South Asian, Islamic, and Asian American studies. We welcome Dr. Jaffer to the panel. Thank you so much, everybody. We are going to now start the questions, and we will start the questions with Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson. The first question, which is coming to you, is what is the best way to advocate for issues and influence a representative in government? This is an important question that we feel that you will address for our audience, and we are going to have this at different levels. So if you could answer for us how this works at state level, and then we're going to, of course, get an answer at the county level, and then we will go on to get it at the municipal level. Thank you so much.
Oftentimes, that single deliberate plan to find out who your rep is can open up so many doors. Forums like this bring us together, and you get to meet people in different sides of New Jersey, but we're all fighting to improve, the overall quality for New Jersey. We often have state legislative days where we get groups that come in and they invite all the legislators to come and speak to their groups and advocate for the issues that are important to them. So that's another great way that we do it at the state level. In addition to receiving a plethora of emails and phone calls, postcard parties, all of those things help us stay connected to the issues that our residents have.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Commissioner Robinson, the same question.
I would have to agree with the Assemblywoman, but also I would encourage everyone, don't just reach out when something bad is happening. Reach out at any time. If there's great news you want to share, if there's something that we may not have thought of, definitely reach out. Get to know who that rep or your representatives are. Have an ongoing conversation. I believe in servant leadership, where your leaders should be accessible and responsive. And so call us to task and reach out. And again, we want to hear from you. Definitely all of us being in this together means you keeping your eyes and ears to what it is that you're hearing and what you know, and sharing that information with leadership. And it truly is a whole different meaning to we're in this together, but certainly reach out to your representatives.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Dr. Jaffer, the same question for you.
I would say be the squeaky wheel, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, elected officials, just like anyone else, we're only human. And so the things that stay top of mind are the things that people have come and spoken to us about. So, I think the most direct manner you can do possible, phone calls are great. Follow up with an email. If nothing happens, go in local, you can go speak during public comment and say, this is an issue that matters to me. So there are various different ways to let your local government know that there's an issue. And feel empowered knowing that your elected officials at every level are there to represent you. And I think truly that's what we want. I know that I share that perspective with the other excellent women public servants on this call with me, that we want to represent you. We want to do what's best for our communities. So let us know what matters to you. If there is something that's good or that's noteworthy that's taking place, that's also wonderful. And then if there is an issue that we can work together to solve, let us know as well. And oftentimes matters will take coordination between local, county, and state, because most issues are not that simple. They're kind of complicated and intertwined. So definitely get to know who your representatives are at every level and feel very comfortable and empowered to reach out to them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffer. That's really great information. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience who are taking some notes. And now the question that we have is really interesting, because it's amazing, as Assemblywoman Jackson also said, some people don't even know how they can get involved, how, what is the way, who's the person that I need to reach out to. So the question here is, why are state and local boards and commissions important? How can ordinary citizens get involved? Because you have to be part of the process to get an answer or to help your other community members. How do we learn about if there is a vacancy somewhere on a commission or a board? How do people know about it? How can they find out and offer their services or say, hey, I would want to serve on this board? And so I will go back to Assemblywoman Jackson for the first.
Awesome. So I got started serving on a board. I had finished college and I was interested in giving back to my community. And I just started looking for nonprofits. I started looking at government, and knowing what I know now from the state level, the governor's office has a whole website dedicated to boards and commissions. And I believe Tim Hillman is the current director of boards and commissions. And we get letters from constituents that are interested in serving on boards and commissions. So we make these referrals all the time. But you can look there. They tell you when the board, their terms are, they tell you when they expire. They'll tell you if it's an expert they're looking for in that field. They'll tell you if it's a public person. So you don't have to technically have the experience of, cosmetology if you want to serve on the board. There may be a public space for you. So you just really, it's up to you to investigate and find out. And I just, we have the MLK Commission, we have the Amistad Commission. The Department of Community Affairs is currently desperately looking for people to serve on their boards and commissions they have over there, desperately. So if you're interested, reach out to Tim Hillman and tell him that I sent you. But they have some. You go to the DCA website and you can see where they have vacancies at. So again, you just have to go look for it, and we'll be there to advocate for you.
Thank you so much. That's great information. Commissioner Robinson, the same question for you. If they want to, get involved at the county level, how do they do that?
We have the same thing on our county website. We do have a drop down or a tab for commissions, committees, and boards. They do come with some expired terms. Just as the Assemblywoman said, sometimes the board is made up of a public person, somebody that's elected, somebody that's a subject matter expert. So again, knowing where your passion lies, where you want to actually serve, do the work and finding out what meets those criteria, and then apply for those commissions, committees, and boards. We do have forms on our website that you can apply. We also have an email portal where we keep resumes and people's letters of interest for the different committees, commissions, or boards. We review them. And actually when vacancies become available, we take into account, at least for that calendar year, those people who showed an interest in serving. And then we try to place them on those different committee, commissions, and boards. Just so you know, for full disclosure and transparency, there are some positions that are politically driven. It is just the way things are. I'm not saying that I totally agree with it. I just figure whoever has a heart to serve and has the people's interests at heart should be able to serve regardless of political affiliation. But I just wanted to put that out there. And certainly, if you know of your neighbors or friends you can put your own grassroots organizations and tackle an issue or a concern or a particular subject matter, and actually be an advisory to those different committees, commissions, and boards, and to your elected officials.
Oh, that's great information. Thank you so much, Commissioner Robinson. And Dr. Jaffer, the same question at the local level.
Yes, so I think, these boards and commissions exist at every level. And oftentimes people are struggling to find appointees to fill them. So that's, I think, a reality that's good for people to know. It's not that it should be that difficult to find somewhere where you can serve in a volunteer capacity. Most of the appointments are made at the beginning of the calendar year. And so decisions are usually made, I would say, around November, December. So, you can submit your resume in Montgomery as well any time of year. But if you want to kind of remind people, I would say check in with your elected officials in November, December, and say, hey, I was interested. And also you can start going to the meetings even before you're appointed. Say that you're interested in serving on the planning board. You can start attending meetings, and that way you'll get educated and people will notice that you were there. Or, the environmental commission, you can always volunteer and start just coming to the meetings, helping them with their events, and then you become a known entity, and that will help you maybe understand if you really want to do it as well. You don't have to wait to be appointed to start, helping or participating with those boards. So that would be my advice. And just know that most of the appointments are made in January, although if there's a vacancy, it could be filled during the year. So if you want to try to get appointed, I would check in with your elected officials at the end of the year.
Okay, that's great information. I think what I'm hearing is participation is key. As they say, democracy is not a spectator sport. So let's all get involved. So I think this is great information. I think we're doing well with the questions, and I'm going to go to the next one.
Nanine, I just wanted to add to that, you can also be proactive and look at the docket that comes out. So if you're reviewing the docket in the beginning of the year, or you're looking at it in July, you can see who's being appointed and what vacancies still exist. And they tell you the same information that's going to be on the website. But I know that's another way. I'm saying, oh, and then we want to congratulate people, right? We want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping up and serving on the board. So I know I review them just to see if there's vacancies and who we can plug in, but also to thank people for their service, because most of these boards are not paid. You're volunteering your time, your talent, and your expertise.
That's great information, Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson. And now I will go to the next question. So this is a question of our times. Efforts are being made at the state and local level to address social injustice and racial inequality. And what steps are being taken at the different levels? Let's look at this. And also, I wanted you ladies to address recent anti-Asian violence as well, as to what steps are being taken presently. So Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson, I'm going to be starting again with you. You seem to have the floor on this.
Well, thank you so much. We have a lot that we're doing. We start off with some diversity in our leadership. We've been asking for to get the Citizen Review Board. So we need your help in uplifting that. It's A4656. It's a racial equity impact assessment for good reason. Some of us commonly know that we're looking to make sure that we have representation to go over some of the disparities that happen in arrests and police. And so we're just looking to make sure that all of these things can be done in a very systematic way, so that there's no one side leaning harder on the other. The other one that I would like to uplift is 4655, and that is the limiting law enforcement at polling locations. So we need your help. It was passed in the Assembly, but has not been passed in the Senate. And so we need help with that. And as we recognize, law enforcement does play a very critical role in securing our ballots and transporting our ballots. We feel like there is no need to have them sit inside a polling location for 16 hours a day. One day for election day. And so we just want to make sure, but now that we've expanded our voting rights, so we have to cheer and uplift that one. We have our 14 days that will start for the general election, but still law enforcement sitting inside polling locations 16 hours a day is intimidating. And when we talk about trying to make all citizens whole, we have our thousands of people that were just on parole or probation that are eligible to vote now. And so when you think about it, the intimidation factor of having law enforcement in those polling locations and at drop boxes as well can deter some people from coming to the polls. And so I think these are unintended consequences. There are some areas that may need them, but law enforcement does their job. They come in, they settle the situation, and then they can exit. And so again, making it an easy process for people to come in and be able to share those civic responsibilities with their families. We shouldn't have to explain to our children or our nieces and nephews why is a policeman or law enforcement inside the polling locations. Let them secure the ballots, because we know that's what they're great at. They're securing ballots and buildings, but we don't need them inside the places. So if you all can help us uplift that, it would be greatly appreciated.
That's a very important point, because sometimes we don't realize that that visualization sometimes can intimidate a lot of people as to I want to do that. Absolutely, that's a great effort that's being made. Commissioner Robinson, the same question. Did you want me to repeat the question, or is that okay? Okay.
That's okay. So at the county level, what we have done is we have a diversity committee which we try to find creative ways to celebrate the diversity in our county, but in those programs, develop educational opportunities to share with others with the different diverse communities that we have within our county. It's just a window dressing to celebrate and have programs that are just scratching the surface or for looks, but it's about actually meeting people where they are, educating others in which they may not come in contact with or encounter people from other ethnic and racial groups and communities. And so the awareness, the education, and the celebrating of all who are within our communities. And so to address the issue with the Asian hate, we have been accessible and visible in the community, joining our Asian community in the cry out against those who are spewing out hate. And so it comes with a level of tolerance, patience, and understanding. And when you have leadership in place that are willing to go the extra mile, stand up, and speak out against those who are not for the betterment of all people at all times, that's when you continue to press forward in having great equality and equity, but also being able to be a partner in making sure that that happens. And so it's not just the responsibility of your leadership, but it's also the responsibility of all who we come in contact with to stand up, speak up, and speak out against hatred.
That's very well said, Commissioner. That's very well said. Dr. Jaffer, the same question to you.
Sure. So in Montgomery, for the past few years, we've been having meetings and discussions that were really precipitated by an anti-Muslim bias crime that happened in town where someone left pork on a Muslim family's car. And so we started having discussions on, anti-immigrant violence, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, and just conversations where people could come together and also learn about the different spaces in our town. So we've had meetings in the synagogues in town, in the churches in town, in the municipal building, in the community center, pre-COVID. And then in the context of COVID, we've done various online events. We had a Montgomery Speaks Out Against Racism event and vigil last year after the murder of George Floyd. And then this year, recently, we had a Montgomery Speaks Out Against Anti-Asian Racism event on Zoom after the attacks on Asian women in Georgia and just the rise of anti-Asian bias crimes. So at the local level, you can pass resolutions to let the community know that these things matter. Last year, we had a resolution against racism and racist violence. We declared racism a public health crisis, hired a vulnerable populations coordinator to reach out to those communities that were more vulnerable based on various factors, but race definitely figures into that in terms of COVID, and also in making sure that we're keeping statistics. So last year was crazy. The pandemic was not anticipated. We were dealing with so many things, but we realized that we weren't necessarily marking down the race of people who were becoming infected or dying from COVID. And that was a push of a lot of people on this call and others saying, we need that data. And then once we had the data, we saw that even in Montgomery, there is such a differential in the race of people who were getting infected and even dying from COVID. So, we have to gather data, we have to prioritize. And then, as you mentioned in my intro, we did meetings last year, workshop sessions for our police leadership and administration with the Black community specifically to understand how we could improve. And now this year, we're in the works of doing a meeting like that for the Asian American community in Montgomery. So those are some things that can be done at the local level, but definitely prioritizing and saying, for example, that we want to diversify our police force. And when I came in as mayor, it was an entirely white male police force. And in a couple of years, we hired 2 female officers and a South Asian officer. So it takes time, but as we prioritize, these impacts are made at the local level as well.
Doctor
Just,
should,
I just like to add something that Dr. Sadaf Jaffer mentioned about the resolutions. So the resolutions at the local level, resolutions at the county level, if it's not in our wheelhouse or our jurisdiction and we have to rely on and push efforts at the state level, we do have our own leadership or elected officials at the local and county level to put forth resolutions or letters of encouragement so that things can be pushed through at the state level. So that's just another way that we support and become advocates for our constituents.
absolutely, Commissioner Robertson. And I think also it goes further, right? When you, Dr. Giraffe, when you were mayor, you talked about not seeing representation in the police force. We can't just talk about it. We have to take action. And sometimes we've heard, I know I've heard in other places, oh, we have a very high standard. Well, those high standards can be barriers to stopping diversity from having participation in those. And it's not just law enforcement, but it's throughout our boards and commissions as well. I had someone reach out to me recently and they were like, I want to join this board. They have no diversity here. And so, again, we begin to have those conversations about, what that entry point looks like. And so again, it's not just talk. We have to figure out those ways to make it actionable, because I feel like we have these conversations and we have these visuals and we have these protests and marches. And it's like, what now after the march? And so this is where the hard work begins, and networking and, communicating with your elected officials to say, listen, we need more of representation on these boards, and they are qualified people available. Go find them. So thank you so much.
No, that's very important, Assemblywoman and Commissioner and Dr. Jaffer. This was really important because people don't realize sometimes that we have to go and ask as well. As constituents, we have to go in and say, we are looking for representation. We want to see diversity. It makes the job of an Assemblywoman or a commissioner or a mayor easier because the community is asking. The community wants to see diversity. So sometimes it has to come from us. And I'm hoping that so many people listening in are thinking of taking some steps like that, asking their local leaders and their county leaders and their state leaders that, yes, like Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson said, there are certain standards. Everybody understands that. But sometimes those standards can intimidate and keep people out who may have the talent. And sometimes those standards can be raised. Education is available. So, that's very important. And I have a very interesting question, which is basically our last question. We are very fortunate today to have such a diverse panel. And I'm sure getting to where you are at these amazing positions would have been a process. So the question here is, what challenges did you face as a person of color holding a government position? And how can maybe the participants, and maybe I'm hoping some high school students are listening, and if they are thinking that this is something they want to do, they want to pursue public service life, what can you tell them that how did you face it, and how can they look at this and maybe learn from you and feel empowered by all that you have done? And Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson seems like she gets the floor first. And there we go. You're just
No, you know what? There has been, I've faced challenges my whole career as being a Black woman, being young, just starting out in the career. It was sexism, it was racism, and it was, all types of isms that I was attacked by, but I persisted. And so that's what I tell young people. You have to persist. You have to continue to work hard. I'm reading a book right now, and I was trying to make sure I got the title right, but it's a book called For Colored Girls Who Are Interested in Politics. And it's an excellent book. And it just talks about these 4 women, how they started out in their careers and their journeys. But there's so many other positions besides being the candidate. There's so many things behind the scenes that need to happen in order for your candidate to be successful. So, there's opportunities in so many different places. And so sometimes I think, everyone wants to be the candidate, but your skill set might be somewhere else. So really get to know who you are, your likes and your dislikes. I know I have folks that, you know, I don't want to be, and I'm really preaching to myself because I didn't want to be the candidate. I just wanted to be behind the scenes. But sometimes you're in a spot where there is nobody else and you are the voice and you have to step up and be the leader. And so, you know, just to get to know who you are and what your interests are and continue to advocate, continue to persist and resist all the denials that you may receive, because all of us on this panel, and I'm sure many of you out there in the audience, have been told no, and then you got mad and you said, you know what, I'm going to do something about that. So continue to persist.
That was very well said, Assemblywoman. Commissioner Robinson, the same question. I'm loving the energy on this panel. This is amazing.
Kind of hard to follow that, but absolutely. But I look at challenges as opportunities. And so while I can't take my brown skin off, being a candidate, certainly getting people to put their guard down. When I was faced with racism in my first time running for the county office. And so I just was able to listen to what their concerns are. And most of the time, the concerns had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with political affiliation. And you meet people where they are. And so you speak to the issues and you speak about the things that transcend regardless of your background. And so I look at challenges as opportunities. And if you tell me no, I'm gonna be motivated to do something to change that narrative, to change that no into a yes. Certainly sometimes it's just beyond my reach. However, when you surround yourselves with people, leaders who can help you get those nays turned into yeses, then you start to change people's mindsets. And then when you can't change their mindset, just accept it and allow people to be who they are. Do not be confrontational. As the Assemblywoman said, there's a soft place to land for everyone. Everyone cannot be a candidate. I can tell you I had no desire to be in politics. Being behind the scenes is my kind of thing. I found even through this pandemic that I'm more of an introvert with extrovert tendencies. And so, but I like serving. So I don't always need to be in the front. And however, opportunity presented itself. And at the time, the situation was right for my home life. A divorced mother of 3, my youngest was going into sophomore year of college. And I said, why not? I didn't like what I saw on either side of the aisle and knew that I could marry my military experience, my management and leadership style and customer service that I do with a local hospital into politics. And so it just worked. And you just have to stay with it. So part of that hard work is doing the heart work. And so once you find your passion and you follow it, whether you're in the leadership role as an elected official or behind the scenes, knowing that you're a part of something greater than yourself is the highest way to serve and be a public servant.
Very well said, Commissioner Robinson. Be the change. I like that. Dr. Jaffer, I'm sure it has been a journey for you as well. And we would love to hear, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear how you faced those challenges and came ahead.
Sure. So, I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind is that women and minorities just face more hostility in general, and definitely in elected office. You know, there's been research to show, for example, that women mayors face much higher levels of harassment and even physical violence. There have been cases rather than as opposed to male mayors. And if you combine that with being a woman of color, we are going to be getting more hate mail. We are going to be getting more hate Twitter messages or whatever it might be. And it is a burden. It's a burden that we bear without talking about it much usually, because we can't. We have to come across as strong and above the fray, but it is tiring. And it certainly has impacted me as a person. So that's just something that I've had to balance and deal with, but also has motivated me to say, well, people need to get used to seeing someone like me in power, because I think that a lot of times people don't like that. Some people don't like seeing that, and they don't want to accept your authority. They're like, how dare you be telling me what to do? But ultimately, we are elected as representatives of our constituents, and we make the best decisions based on what we think are in their best interest. And when I was elected, I had some students at Princeton interview me, and they were asking, you know, as a woman of color in politics and academia, those which are generally white male dominated fields, what is it like? And I said, actually, I think in a way politics is easier, because if you have the votes, you win. I mean, people might not want to accept what you have to say, but if you're the mayor, you make the decision at the end of the day. So, I mean, I think this is something that will change over time as people get more used to it and we see more diversity, but we have a long way to go. And I always use that to motivate me, that when people see me, then they will feel more comfortable running for office, or even voting, or even expressing their needs at a township committee meeting or in an email. So I think the challenges are certainly there, and it's definitely not all like glory and award ceremonies. All of that is maybe what we post on our social media. There's a lot of other stuff happening that we have to deal with, but it motivates me to say, well, we need to change. And this is something that I'm doing not just for myself, but for all my communities that haven't had a voice, haven't had a seat at the table.
That's very well said. I think diversity in leadership definitely empowers others to make that effort and say, I want to get into this as well. I think we're doing really well time-wise. This has been a wonderful discussion. I think I'm going to ask Diane. I believe there's some questions, Diane, that people in the audience have, and we are going to get to the questions. Diane, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I just had to find that mute button. I have a lot of, hi everyone, I'm Diane Carlino. I work with Neena Singh and Nadine Stern in STAND Central New Jersey, and it's a delight to have our speakers with us today. Really interesting discussion. So we have a few questions in the chat, and I'm also looking for anyone who would like to ask a question. You can raise your hand now. But let's go. I'm wondering if Sandra Austin, if you wouldn't mind asking your question. Are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon. My question as a citizen that's concerned about things going on at, different levels of government. When your specific representatives are already working in the direction you would like them to work, how effective is it to be in communication with other government officials of a different party, of a different region? Part of me says, well, you have no right to talk to them. And part of me says, hey, these people are supposed to represent the entire state, the entire nation, not just their region. So what would you suggest in terms of trying to affect votes from others outside your specific area?
Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson.
I would say, in our two houses, we have an 80-40 dynamic. And so you have to reach out sometimes. I find a practice of doing that all the time, because you never know. It's not fair just to say if you're a D or an R that you don't support the legislation. We've had a lot of things that have come together. So do both. Reach out to everyone, know the rules. Sometimes I need 41 and, sometimes I need 21. So you got to know the rules, and you got to make friends on both sides. I'll let the other members of the panel talk about the rules, how many you need for different types of votes. But and then we still have to work with the governor so that we don't get a veto. So, it's not just singular. It's very complex, but still reach out to everyone.
Thank you. I think Sadaf wanted to.
Dr. Jaffer.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you can always contact representatives that aren't your own. frankly, I don't think that they will pay as much attention to you as they would to their own constituents. So what I've found to be more effective is connect with people who are in those districts who agree with you and work with them on messaging, on contacting, on saying, okay, we need people in XYZ district, we need people in XYZ state to talk to their congressperson or to their legislator about this issue. I think that that's a little bit more effective than just directly communicating with a representative that's not your own. And, you know, find if you're a Democrat, for example, and you want to support Democrats in other districts, there are efforts like sister districts, or, you know, contact your party or people who advocate for similar issues, like if your issue is gun rights, you know, gun safety. So I think it's more effective to actually empower the constituents in those districts that agree with you. That would be my advice.
And I would say, again, don't be afraid to reach out if they're outside of your district. I know at the state level, for instance, knowing who is the sponsor or co-sponsor of a particular bill at the legislative level, or even at the federal level, reaching out and sharing your concerns or your issues with what's going on. And so it goes both ways. Definitely reach out to your sister municipality, your sister district, and find groups that have the shared concerns and issues that you may have, and you're mightier together in numbers. So definitely when you meet with that representative, then it will be more effective.
Thank you. So we have a question from Beth Morgan, and then Nick, we'll get to your question. Beth, you still.
Just to follow up on what everybody said about the sister district, is that something that is easily accessible by the you know, people can find out who's their sister district, or is that information, where would they find it, in case our audience, is that something we can?
I mean, there's one organization called Sister Districts where they match people up. But I think it's a principle beyond that, even like that if you care about gun safety and all of your representatives are already very much in line with you, then you could help support people in other districts, give them the same language, or say, well, our state is doing this, you all should advocate for the same thing. But yeah, there's different efforts out there to do this, and just find the one that works for you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, so Beth Morgan, why don't you?
Actually, Steve is going to ask the question.
I'm Beth's husband. And
Hello,
so question to one of the previous questions asked, Assemblywoman Jackson is a sponsor of so many bills that we're interested in, but they're sometimes sitting in a committee and not moving. So the question is, does it have any impact to reach out to the chair of the committee, or should we be reaching out to Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson and sort of saying, do you think this is worth pushing? I'm thinking of the restorative justice pilot program, or the accountability of disciplinary records. There's some bills that are wonderful that you're sponsoring, but they're not moving.
Yes, reach out. Yes. So absolutely reach out to the chairs. You have to. It's not just, you know, because it's my bill and everybody loves me, but we need the pressure. So Mr. Morgan, you are absolutely right. Reach out to the chairs. You can reach out to the speaker. You can reach out to the leadership to say, we want to have this bill heard. And that shows how important it is. And it also goes back to local. You know, I get calls all the time, you know, about an abandoned car that's been on the street. And if you're only person that calls about that one car, it takes me longer than if I had 30 to 40, 50 people calling, because everybody on the block is like, whose car is this? Come move this car. But it makes it harder when I have that singular person. So even in the legislature, the more, the better. So thank you so much for uplifting the restorative justice. That's A4663. That is going to be, we're trying to close our youth prison systems. because they are antiquated and we know they don't work, but it also provides wraparound services for when
Yes.
they go back home. And so this is a large ticket. It's about $8.6 million, but we know that at this current moment, it costs about $400,000 per kid to sit in an institution that isn't going to do the same thing. So why not use those dollars in another program that's going to help them not only be successful, but also help their families as well. So thank you so much. And I see Vertuli also put that in the chat as well.
Thank you, and we'll very much so, and we'll go to Nick for his question.
Thank you. Yeah, mine's more of kind of like a fun question, but Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson, you mentioned that out of college you started on a board or commission. Which one was that, and what sort of impact did it have on you? And then kind of like a grander question for everyone, since that's more specific. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about the lifeline between boards and commissions and legislation and the people who are elected in office? Thank you.
So I started out on the zoning board, and it was a vacancy, and and oftentimes zoning boards and planning boards have trouble filling those positions. So I was able to serve on there. I learned so much about city planning. You know, where do you want to put your next school, your next park, your next grocery store? We learned about gentrification. You know, where do we need to build our new housing? How do we change the conversation from developers coming in to say, we want to build here, to us as a city saying, we need you to build here. So it changes the dynamics of the conversation. You're much more informed about it. And you can, you know, I'm all about repurpose and reuse, but also understand that I think we took 10 additional years to build a brand new high school. And although I love our historic pieces, we also lost $10 million in doing that process. So I think our kids deserve new, we deserve the technology. And so we need to continue to build new schools so that every day you walk into a brand new facility, you can feel like $1,000 walking in and out. And sometimes you can't get that in a repurpose. And so it depends, but I absolutely love urban planning. And so that's how I got started. And I serve on a lot of boards, now that you mention it, Nick, that concern economic development. So thank you so much for that great question.
And I think for the general question, the work comes in with the commissions, committees, and boards. They are of an advisory nature. And so a lot of times subject matter experts, and I just like to say that's where the real magic happens, because they do a lot of the heavy lift and getting the information. I know for a county level, I know at the state level, the Assemblywoman has staff as well as being able to communicate with commissions, committees, and boards. But on the county level, definitely that's where the heavy lift is, and in addition to the staff. And so what is seen from the rock that they sit on versus where I sit definitely has its way of being a collaborative effort in understanding and listening to what it is that they have to say, what it is that they bring to the table, and then acting on it as well as we can.
Yeah, and I would say, like, at the local level, your township committee only meets, or in Montgomery, we meet twice a month. So there's only so much that can happen in those township committee meetings. And a lot of things happen at the board and commission meetings. That's when they're following up on specific issues. And as I mentioned earlier, we are your representatives. So we want to represent what the community is saying their needs are, and the boards and commissions give us an insight into what the community wants. And so it's actually very helpful to know what the boards and commissions are advocating for, because again, then we can go and say, well, this is what the board is, advising us to do. They are representing the public. So there is very much a connection and a back and forth between the boards and commissions, and it's a great way to impact policy and make a difference in your community without necessarily having to run for office yourself.
That's great.
Okay, so we have a question from Gabby. Would you like to come forward and ask?
Yes, Thank you very much, Diane, and thank you to the speakers for really stressing the importance of every person on every level's advocacy, and that it's possible at the grassroots level. We've done quite a bit of that, but I'm hoping that you can give us some insight into some of the hurdles and the grit work to get a bill to committee, to a floor vote and passed. The whole legislative process sometimes seems less transparent and easier. It's not a straight line, and sometimes we fall down a rabbit hole. But worse than that, sometimes our representatives seem to fall down a rabbit hole as well. And when they support a bill or an idea, they have a very hard time pushing them across a finish line or even progressing them. So that's been somewhat frustrating. In addition, we sometimes feel that they're being pressured by the above powers, the people of greater political power in their parties that really determine committee assignments and funding and status. So, you know, we can understand that, but it doesn't really help the end result that we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Gabby. Really, it depends on what the bill is. I could tell you for bills that come with dollars attached to it, appropriations, and it depends on, you know, the advocacy that happens around it. We try to, I know there's a bill that's circulating now about the environment, and they started a campaign before the bill even had a number. And so sometimes you have to start off early in order just to gain that support. And even thereafter, because it's going to be a heavy price tag to it. I think a good example is Senator Turner's bill she had for body cameras. Senator Turner had this bill out probably for over a decade, and it just got passed. I did the version where we had to do the appropriations for the body cameras, but you know, it is about the appetite and who is going to be able to fund and support it. But it's a long haul. I think if you were, you know, we talk about it now because you know, things are moving. But when she first told me that this was a 10-year-old bill, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this to me was common sense, but obviously it was not to some other people. So that's why I said, you know, we have to keep on persisting, keep on persevering. We have to just keep on working through these things. And you'll see it on some of our legislative pages, bills that we file over and over and over again every single year because they weren't heard. And so they die. And so you have to refile them again and again, but it's of these issues that are so important to us that we have to continue to fight for them.
Thank you very much. Shanel? Yeah.
I would agree. You just can't give up. But again, as Dr. Jaffer mentioned earlier, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so you have to be persistent and insistent and just keep at it. Add to your conversation other people, other groups, in order to push an effort forward. A lot of times the red tape comes behind who you have elected into office. And again, this has nothing to do with the DRR, but if you know who the candidates and those elected officials or your representatives are, and understanding how they voted in the past, especially if they're a career political leader or politician. I hate using the term politician, but certainly knowing how they vote, where they stand on issues, if they actually vote with a conscience and with the people in mind, or if they're just rubber stamping. And so we have to get away from those who are voting. Your civic duty does not start and stop by being a registered voter and casting that vote. We need your issues. We need your voice at the table. We need to hear from you and understand what it is that's going to make life a quality of life for everybody, regardless of their background. And so this is where the collaboration and the partnership comes with the leadership actually being accessible and visible to the communities that they represent. And so I often say, regardless of whether you voted for me or not, I'm still in the position, and I was elected into that position, and I'm duty bound by oath and just by how I was raised to do the job. And so it doesn't matter to me if you call my office. I don't ask, are you a R? I don't ask if you're a D. I don't ask for your racial or ethnic background. I don't ask for sexual preference. None of that matters. It's doing the work and actually understanding what those issues are. And so just stay at it, keep at it. One example is Juneteenth. This will be the inaugural year of it being a holiday. Thank you, Assemblywoman. But also as a county elected official, the term freeholder was changed just in a matter of 90 days or so. And this is something that had been worked on a little bit over 10 years. And certainly as a Black elected official, that term was offensive to me. And as we change the landscape and being inclusive, we have to be sensitive to the needs and concerns of everyone involved. And so again, it took over 10 years. Part of the problem is no one could agree on what the term should be, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Look at what others are doing well and tweak it to make it your own. And so we don't have to make it harder than what it is. And oftentimes in government it is. But again, hold us accountable, hold us to task, call upon us, write the letters, send the emails, and your vote and your voice matters. So never give up and never let anyone dampen it out.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We have a question from Vertuli. Are you still on the call? Yes. Would you like to ask your question?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I have actually a couple, but to keep it real short, one, what is the difference between a board and a commission is one of my questions. And then how do you avoid there being a potential conflict of interest, like if you do other work or you support other organizations, you know, sitting on a board and then let's say, for example, they vie for a grant or something that's going to come before you. And then lastly, what is your office doing, if anything, towards, I put reformative justice, but I think it's called restorative justice. So bear with me for a little bit. Sorry about that if I didn't title it correctly.
I'll start with the latter question. What our office and at my level, what we're doing is, for me personally as a leader, making sure that I read those bills, understanding what's in it, meeting with my state legislature or my delegation to make sure I understand, keeping in communication with them, and hearing from me at that level, letting them know what I'm hearing from the local level, from the constituents. And so I have to have an understanding in order to speak to it, in order to be an advocate. That's one. To the conflict, if you're on a board or commission, you just abstain from voting, or maybe remove yourself when that topic is being talked about, because really you're of an advisory nature. The vote comes to push it forward to those who actually can enact legislation, resolution, or law. So if you feel there's going to be a conflict, you can always reach out to legal counsel or advisory to that board. And again, remove yourself from that conversation when it's actually happening. Remove yourself from the room. And then the board, difference between a board and commission, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the commission, you're actually appointed. And it comes with an appointment from the governmental entity that puts you in that position. And a board is a volunteer, which they're all volunteer, but that comes with a term when you're on when you're a commission. So I hope I answered that. And yeah, any of the other two panels.
Yes,
So I just wanted to uplift a couple of things at the state. We have the implicit bias training that's with the police officers and in their materials as well. That was a bill that was passed. We're also got the independent prosecutor bill passed. And so the other one that we're working very diligently on, I know I brought it up earlier, was the Civilian Review Board. That has not passed yet, but we're still working on that. And then we have also an implicit bias training bill for healthcare officials that are in the healthcare industry, because we know, especially in maternal health, Black women rates are much higher, and so we're trying to reduce those rates. But we know that the gatekeepers, doctors, and everyone in that healthcare field needs to have some cultural sensitivity and also understand their own bias in order to help mom deliver a healthy baby. So those are just a few quick things that we're doing to try to bring more awareness about why implicit bias training is definitely needed in our legislature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that.
Are there other questions? Anyone can raise their hand, put a question in the chat.
I had a comment in the question
Great.
about, I think it was about like things getting stuck or taking a really long time. And I think, you know, though it seems like, wow, people were talking about things for 10 years and they finally got accomplished, they did ultimately get accomplished. And so I think that just goes to show that activism and advocacy is building brick by brick, and that politics is really about building consensus around things. So 10 years ago, people might have thought, what is Juneteenth? Why would we need to celebrate it? But there's been education, advocacy over the years. More people know what the holiday is, what it's about. And it finally got to the point where there was enough consensus built around it that it could be passed. So, you know, I'm always, my message for people is always to avoid being cynical and to just think it does sometimes take a while for things to happen politically, but it is, every effort is building towards it. So you could think how discouraged someone might be if every year for 10 years they're trying for something, but it doesn't go through. But then eventually it does, because enough consensus has been built, enough people have asked questions about what is this about. So I would just say things don't always move fast, but there is definitely possibility for things to become more the norm or more accepted as we create education and inform the public and our fellow elected officials about various issues.
Great.
Very well said, and Dr. Jaffer. I think we have any more questions, or do we?
Actually, I actually have a question, and I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to this. You know, when we consider, when we go to the election, go to the voting booth, we are hiring a mayor, we are hiring a council commissioner, and we are hiring an assembly person, we're hiring a state senator. How do you all, within your own positions, work together in ways that we don't necessarily see that interaction between the various levels of the towns to the counties to the state level? Can you speak a little bit to that? I find this interesting to see this perspective and this swath of opportunity that that you all do and responsibility that you all have, but at different levels. But you must be working together in a way that we don't necessarily see it all the time.
I think of it just like in a corporation, when you're trying to bring a project to end, you may have to work with other departments in order to get the job done, and everybody has a role and a task. And so I often try to reach out to people at different levels of government to understand what they're dealing with, how it impacts me and my constituents at my level, and certainly understanding what role that others in different levels of government play in order to accomplish what it is that I'm working on, or the rest of the commissioners are working on. And so it requires that networking. It requires picking up a phone and calling on those who are of influence and of power to get the things done that you know that you need to get done, or that the constituents want. And so it becomes a conversation. It becomes maybe even me as a commissioner attending one of the committee meetings in order to push something through, to be a voice, and actually getting on the docket to say, I want to speak at public session. I mean, I'm a taxpayer as well. So I just happen to be an elected official that is a resident of the state of New Jersey and a resident of the Somerset County. So it may take that extra effort for me to constantly pick up the phone and call in different elected officials to voice that concern.
And you bring up a very good point, Commissioner. I make it a practice of reaching out. So I know when Commissioner Robinson, we might have been on a call, and even with Dr. Jaffer was on a call, I make it a point of giving out my contact information. I told them, this is just the start. I've been in, I call it public service, because I'm like you, I don't like the terminology politician. It seems so dirty, but we're public servants. We're here, we're advocating for you, for your interests. So I think we just have to make sure that we're out all the time, and this is something that I enjoy doing. It's a part of who I am. It's I love advocating. I'm a YWCA girl, so I grew up empowering women and eliminating racism. This isn't new conversation for me. And so I'm glad that I have more people, especially on this call, that has joined the choir, that want to be able to uplift our voices and making New Jersey just a better place to live. So it's groups like yours that we go to because we want to hear what you have to say, and we want to share our thoughts and ideas that we've heard throughout the state and actually throughout the country. I'm a member of national organizations, and I go to all types of meetings to get information. I tell you, it's really, for me, it just sets my soul afire. Like, I'm on fire now, like listening to all of these conversations with like-minded people. And let me be real, we don't always agree. We don't always agree. We can disagree about things, but I think at the end of the day, there is a compromise to be made, or we can just respectfully disagree on the topic. But this is just something that I'm passionate about, and so I'm an avid also athlete. I even thought about I found a cruise that went to 3 different islands, that they were running 5Ks on these different islands. Now, for me, this seems awesome. Like, I could do all this running at these different places. For somebody else to be like, what? You want to go on a cruise and you want to go do a run? You're like, what are you, crazy? But these are things that I'm passionate about. And so I find the best interest, and I just try to enjoy it as I'm going through this journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that a great example of the need for coordination, and I think it was done really well, was with the pandemic. And I specifically have to commend Commissioner Director Robinson for how she coordinated all the mayors in Somerset County. We spoke every single day about what was happening with the pandemic, what the numbers were, how we were addressing it. And then, as we got the hang of it, it became weekdays only, and then a few days a week. But that, to me, showed how important it is for that communication to be there, and to have good, strong leaders who are well-informed, who want to understand the public. And, the same thing, there was coordination with the governor's office and with our assembly people contacting us as mayors, with our senators and our congresspeople. So that, to me, showed why it's so important that we do know each other, that we connect with each other. And I think for me, going to the ballot booth from now on, really the question that I'll ask myself is, who do you trust to lead in an emergency? Because really, when there's an emergency, your electeds have to be able to coordinate, have to be able to work together. And I think that we saw that working very well in New Jersey, in my experience as a mayor last year.
That's really great.
That's great. Thank you so much for the answers to that. I really appreciate that. Nick has brought up one more question. I don't know, Nick, if you want to just say it briefly. And
Go ahead, Diane. It's okay.
Okay. He was talking a bit about why it's important and essential to show up for the good, even if it's even when it might feel that things are progressing well, that we've made changes. We know it when things are bad. We can be on your doorsteps, making sure that change comes. But tell us a little bit why it's kind of imperative to let you know when it's good.
Because there's rarely an issue that everyone agrees on. So if anything has been done or accomplished by your elected officials, you can be sure that they faced pushback from either their fellow elected officials or from other members of the public who don't agree with you that it's a great thing. And they will be sure to write their letters of complaint or their letters to the editor or their social media posts. And so if you don't express your positive perspective on those decisions, then those other voices dominate. And then your elected officials might think twice about advocating for the same issue again, because they're not sure, was it really worth it? Was I representing my community? Or, are these other voices telling me that this isn't really something that people wanted? And it is, I would say every accomplishment took some, emotional, mental work to push through. And so you need to motivate your electeds to say, yes, this was worth it. We want you to do more of the same, and don't listen to those few squeaky wheels who might not really represent everyone, but they're coming to every meeting saying, why did you do XYZ? That was unnecessary. We don't want you to invest in, that matter. So it is important to say when you're in agreement with your electeds as well, so they can keep going in that direction and know that they're representing you.
Okay, it's really helpful. Okay, back to Neena.
Yes, I think I'm just listening to it. First of all, Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson, if that cruise is happening, can you please let us know? I want to sign up now before everything is sold out. This was such an enlightening and informative session, so full of power, I have to say, that I am just so impressed. And I think we are blessed to have leadership as our panel, that they are representing us at state, county, municipal level. Again, I'm amazed, and I'm hoping everybody on this call realizes that we are very fortunate to have you guys in our corner. We are, very thankful for that. And on behalf of STAND and the virtual audience of 100 plus, or maybe even more now, I want to thank you for your time. I'm really thankful that you came, and we really learned a lot. I'm so glad that this is being recorded. We will make sure it is on STAND Central New Jersey website, so people who couldn't make it because there were still kids activities happening. And, as we know, parents are busy, so they can, watch this on their own time, and we'll reach out to you for if there's anything more they want to, find out. But thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of STAND, thank you so much.